Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
We all know very well that China is the world's biggest and the most enthusiastic lender. Enthusiastic to the extent that while other countries may go looking for loans to IMF, World Bank, etc., and they will then put conditions and think about it for a long time, China actually markets its loans because China's debt, loans that China gives out, because China has enormous amounts of foreign exchange and trade surplus. So the debt China gives out is also an instrument of policy. It's also an instrument of strategic gain. It's also an instrument of forward purchase of essential commodities, fuel, for example, petroleum products. So that is a well-known thing. Now, how big is China's debt? So I see a story on Al Jazeera. I'll share a link with you. That sort of story tells us that a German institute, that is Kiel Institute of World Economy, they had estimated that between 2000 and 2017, that's 4 years old, 2000 and 2017, China's debt given to the world, that means the amount that the world owed to China, was already $5 trillion. It had grown from $500 billion, that is $500 billion in 2000, to $5 trillion in 2017. That is the size to which Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been promising to take India's economy to. It won't happen in 2024 or 5 as he had promised, but at some point it will get there. At this point, India's economy or GDP is about 3 trillion, right? So China, the money that the world owes to China is almost twice at this point, because this is 2017, or probably more than twice India's GDP. That's the amount of money China has lent to the world. Now, so what's new? What's new is that yet another very reputed think tank, that is think tank called Aid Data. This is a think tank run at William and Mary Research University at Virginia in the US. Now, they have a large group that they set up some time back, and you will see a screenshot of their cover page of their website. That group actually was set up by a bunch of think tanks who thought that a lot of the aid institutions were not making informed decisions on which country to give aid to or give loan to. So they compiled data on debt to countries and assistance to countries. So they have studied over 4 years, they've spent 4 years over this project, studying China's debt to other nations. So the first data point I told you, 500 billion to 5 trillion between 2000 and 2017, that had already made China a bigger lender than the 38 richest countries in the world about amount of loans they had given out. Those 38 richest countries, usually we classify them in OECD categories, that is the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. That was set up some 70 odd years ago in 1948, so that richer countries could assist other countries to grow. Those are the OECD countries. Now, China by itself had become a bigger lender than all of them put together and more. But what this report tells us, it's a 120-page report, so I will share the entire report with you, the link, and you can read it if you want to. We've read it up for you, and I've also been helped by Amog Rometra and Sukriti Vats in doing so, and they've also taken out the highlights. Now, this report tells you something more startling. This tells you that of all the debt that countries owe to China, there is 385 billion, not a joke, 385 billion, which is on no country's balance sheet. This is off balance sheet debt. So when a country A owes money to country B, then country A's documentation, balance sheet, budget lists its foreign debt. For example, if you go to your own finance ministry website in India, you will see your debt listed. Also, how much money India owes to which country. But what the Chinese have been doing, on the other hand, is giving debt to countries in such a way that it does not reflect on their balance sheet. So what happens? Company A wants to lend money to company B. Company B is desperate. Company B's balance sheet is short. Company B's balance sheet has red all over it. If it goes to a credit rating agency, they will say, no, you can't give them any credit. It's risky, right? We will not recommend it. So no bank, nobody in their senses would lend money to that country, except the Chinese, right? Now, if country A is China and country B say is Laos, and there is a reason I say Laos, then country A or company A, which is China, will say, don't worry, buddy. I know that your balance sheet is short, but I will lend you money. How will I do it? I will do it by not lending it to you, but company A will lend it to a subsidiary of company B. The subsidiary has its own balance sheet, but everybody knows who owns the subsidiary. So implicit in this is a sovereign guarantee कि ठीक है, मैंने तो उसका एक रेलवे कंपनी बनाया है. I've set up a joint railway company, joint venture railway company with that country. This money is being given to that joint venture railway company. Now, if the company is not able to repay me, then I can always go after the owner of the company, which is the sovereign government of Laos. So while there is no obvious or stated sovereign guarantee, there is an implicit sovereign guarantee. Now, what this research tells us is it's quite stunning. What this research tells us is that of the $385 billion that these countries owe, nearly 138 countries owe China off their balance sheets, right? 42 of these countries, 42 sovereign countries in the world have this off-balance sheet debt to the Chinese exceeding 10% of their GDP. So just think about it, right? They must be also owing a lot more money to the Chinese, but just off balance sheet, 42 countries have more than 10% of their GDP. It is that much of a crisis in the global debt markets. Now, the reason we use the example of Laos is simply because Laos tops this dubious list. Its off-balance sheet debt to China is 35% of its GDP, and I don't think it's declining right now. And there are other countries also which are quite challenged on that score, and I will give you some numbers. Not all the countries, 42 is a lot. You will see the list on my screen, and we will run that screen slowly so you can see it, or maybe take a screenshot. So Laos, as I told you, has 35% of its GDP, or equivalent of 35% of its GDP owed to the Chinese off-balance sheet. Turkmenistan has 23%, Kazakhstan has 16%, Kyrgyzstan has 30%, Sri Lanka has 12%, and Venezuela, I also picked out of this list of 42, has 18%, but there is a different reason why I picked that out. Now, I will tell you the reason I picked out these. Laos, of course, because it's the topmost, but Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, these are countries surrounding, in a way, Afghanistan. So when Afghanistan is outsourced by the Western world, say, to the Chinese, and Chinese say that they will give assistance to Afghanistan and they will help Afghanistan revive their economy, then you can see the countries around Afghanistan are already deeply indebted to China. So China is building its own sort of co-prosperity sphere with its own debt to these countries. I will then come to how does China recover these debts. Now look at a country like Kyrgyzstan. 30% of its GDP equivalent is owed to China on off-balance sheet basis. Now, which is the other country which has a long border with Afghanistan, the longest border? That is Pakistan. Now, Pakistan does not, surprisingly, qualify to be in this list of 42. Now, that is because, one, Pakistan has a very large economy. Unlike many of the other countries, comparatively, Pakistan has a very large economy. Now, don't compare Pakistan with India. Pakistan's economy at this point is about $300 billion. So, first of all, one larger figure, larger data point. The money owed by borrower countries from China of their respective balance sheets is much more than the GDP of a large 23 crore population country called Pakistan, right? Pakistan's economy is just under $300 billion. The second thing is Pakistan does not cut this 10% list simply because only 1% of Pakistan's GDP is their off-balance sheet borrowing from China. The rest they've been borrowing on sovereign government to government basis. And that itself amounts to about 7% of Pakistan's large GDP. So total comes to about 8 point something percent. So Pakistan also comes into nearly the 10% bracket of its GDP being equivalent of China's debt. The other important thing is, if you see data from Asia Nikkei, confirmed by all other sources, including international lending institutions, the average borrowing cost for Pakistan from China is 3.76%. Now, when you make these comparisons, don't think about what HDFC or somebody is charging you for a housing loan. Nations borrow from each other and rich nations lend money at very low prices. So OECD countries, developed countries, on an average lend to other countries at 1.1%. Most European countries, developed countries by themselves lend to a country like Pakistan, if they were to lend, at 1%. China is lending at 3.76%. In fact, if you look at the pool of this off balance sheet debt that China has given to all these countries, $385 billion worth, that is at 4% on a sovereign nation to nation debt basis. That's a very, very high cost, because these are all high inflation economies. They will have to pay the Chinese back in hard currency or harder currency, and they will all be in trouble. So that is where China has got the world at its fingertips in many ways. But at the same time, that's how China has created some tension for itself. Because what happens if people refuse to pay you? Because increasingly now, countries which have taken China's debt for their projects are running into trouble. We saw something in our neighborhood. We saw in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka were not able to service their debt on the port of Hambantota. Now, once again, this Al Jazeera story will tell you that they've had no choice but to give away the hometown of the Rajapakshes to the Chinese. I mean, not the entire town, but the port on a 100-year lease. So what the Chinese do is, paisa vasool karne ke liye, to get their money back, they get paid in kind. So many of these countries, if you look at this list carefully, you will see Sudan, South Sudan, Brunei. These are countries to which China has lent a lot of money, and most of it off balance sheet, right? Most of it on the side. So sovereign risk is camouflage, but everybody knows, right? Nobody can hide that fact. Everybody knows, but nobody wants to also fight with the Chinese. So nobody says, "Beta, chupa rahe ho, you're hiding something." But I know people let it pass, right? But countries like Brunei, Sudan, South Sudan, so many of these countries in Africa, many countries, Cameroon, these countries are resource rich. So China eyes their resources that, all right, you take the money now, but my collateral is supply of so much of copper, for example, copper ore, or so much of oil. 18% of Venezuela's GDP equivalent is off balance sheet borrowing from China. China has collateralized that completely against crude oil supplies from Venezuela. Venezuela, as we know, has the largest, among the largest storehouses of crude oil in the world. And Venezuela is a sanctioned country in deep trouble for various reasons. Similarly, a lot of the lending that China has given to Russia is also securitized or collateralized against Russia's future oil and gas supplies. So China is buying what it needs to. It's giving the money ahead. It's giving the money at a high rate of interest, 4 times as high as you might get on a sovereign basis from a developed or rich country. So to that extent, China also becomes a usurious power. It's also a strategic weapon, because now China knows Pakistan, for example. Pakistan may not yet be at 10% level of its GDP being owed to China. It's close, it's about 8%. But the important thing is that the largest BRI investment or largest BRI lending, that is Belt and Road Initiative, from China to any country in the world is to Pakistan. It's $27.3 billion. Just think about it. What a big investment this is. This is investment. These are highways, railway lines, factories, townships, everything going over real estate, everything going over land. So this becomes a foothold, and that is how Pakistan might think, because they are so driven by their blood feud idea of India, they've now become a protectorate of China. So good, it's a comfortable feeling, but the fact is, it's also a feeling of having become an economic colony. And that's happening to many other countries. No surprise tomorrow if the same thing happens to Afghanistan as well, that all right, Afghanistan, in any case, your GDP is so small, so I will give you, in the course of time, maybe 50% of equivalent of your current GDP as debt, but your copper reserves and other rare metal reserves, rare earth reserves, they in the future will be sold to me, and how will you take them out? I will come and prospect them, and you protect me and you help me, and the Pakistanis will help me and protect me. That is how the Chinese work. But this is now coming to an end. Because what's happening is, in a lot of countries, protests are now breaking out. Protests are breaking out because, again, the same study tells you, this 8 data study tells you that in 35% of these projects, that is more than 1 out of 3, there are now either protests, popular protests, or public opinion has turned against them, or the projects have gone wrong and become unviable because of delays, etc., or there are labor law issues, or there are environmental issues. Compared to this, it's not as if all of China's projects before BRI were all pure. That is not the case. Before BRI, 21% of the Chinese projects and joint ventures got into this crisis. Today, it's 35%. There is a difference between 21% and 35%. So that is what the Chinese also are getting worried about, because how will they get paid for these if this is how it goes? Again, if you look at the main data points, China lately has been giving away $85 billion of assisted debt to other countries in a year. $85 billion. $85 billion, it's a lot of money, but how does it matter? So I will explain to you. Because you always make comparisons with percentages, so this $85 billion that China gives out every year compares to $37 billion, which is all of the aid, assistance, debt, loans that America gives out every year, right? So 37 versus 85, right? That is the difference. Another data point, for every $1 that China gives out as assistance, it gives out how many as loan, as debt? 33. So only 3% of what China gives out to other countries is aid. 97% is debt. And debt with interest rates 4 times as high as the OECD interest rate. So lending for China is a big successful business. Now, because BRI is getting these debt sustainability challenges, because BRI projects are getting into trouble, now globally there is concern that there are these hidden debts about China. And too many countries now are getting into the sovereign debt issues. And these questions are being raised. And this report, which has now come out, has created some kind of a sensation in the global financial markets. This 8 Data Research Lab report actually has studied 13,427 Chinese projects in other countries over 18 years, right? Worth $843 billion. So this is a very detailed study that they have carried out. So I'll run through some of the highlights very quickly with you now. First of all, I told you the big data points, $85 billion per year, $385 billion of balance sheets now. Second, the Chinese state-owned lenders are only focusing on maximizing returns, because for love or money, no other sovereign protected debt will bring you 4% right now on hard currency, which is what the Chinese are doing. Number 3, mega projects of the size of $500 million, that is $500 million or more, in the first 5 years of BRI, they have tripled. So you can see how many big projects are coming up everywhere. Now, so much of debt is being given out to these. The Chinese institutions and banks are also worried that I may have too much exposure to some country or some entity in some country. So they are also now sharing that debt. They are syndicating that debt and co-financing it. At this point, 32% of all of China's debt given out to BRI projects is co-financed, right? So that is being done between China's many public sector banks, institutions, lending organizations, and similarly, these are given to other countries, borrowing organizations or banks or joint ventures, Chinese joint ventures, etc., with an implicit sovereign guarantee. Then 83% of debt so collateralized against future resources, etc., come from countries which form the bottom quartile of the global measure of fiduciary risk, right? So these are the most risky countries to lend to, but China has secured itself by securing their resources for the future. And you see, who's going to fight with the big brother? Big brother will come and give you 2 slaps and you will pay up. Next, China has followed a trend of giving loans to resource-rich countries. Again, because you can buy these resources cheap, You can securitize your money at high interest rates and you can secure these resources early and deny them to their rivals. Pre-BRI, most of China's debt was to sovereign entities or countries. Post BRI, 70% of its debt now is to state-owned companies, banks, special purpose vehicles, joint ventures, private sector institutions, right? And these don't appear on any country's balance sheet. This is the method they followed in giving money out to LMICs, that is low and middle income countries. What this does is, why should it be a problem? Because if somebody, I'm not saying, say, a Government of India company borrows like that, but say if company A owned by Government of India borrows money from a country, right? It is a sovereign risk because that even if it's a company, NTPC, BHEL, Air India, all these are companies. If there's a default on the debt, then the sovereign, the owner, which is the government, will pay up because no government wants to be defaulting on debt by companies owned by it. So then the line between public and private debt gets blurred. So you can now see China as the big brother, right? China is not doing you a favor by giving you debt. China is running a business by lending. It's lending from nation to nation at 4 times the price. It's also lending where a nation is not capable of borrowing because its balance sheet is short. It's also willing to lend to other entities under that nation, presuming that its money will come back, right? And if the money doesn't come back, then the Chinese will come and they'll know how to get it. And also, in any case, in most cases, wherever there's a risk, they have already protected themselves. In conclusion, many of you keep asking me to recommend some books or the kind of books I read. So the kind of books I read usually are not very serious, right? A lot of them are actually very funny books. So one of my favorite authors of all times, he's not been writing so much lately, is P.J. O'Rourke. So this is called Eat the Rich, a treatise on economics. It's a lone humorist's effort to explain all of the economics for us. So I see the chapter called Good Capitalism, in which he's explaining what the various bonds are in the bond market. So he says, for example, various companies such as Standard & Poor's provide bond ratings from AAA to D. AAA, आपको देखते हैं ना, AAA rated, AAA plus, from AAA to D to help you estimate how safe your debt instrument is. And then he says a D-rated bond is like money lent to your younger brother, right? You don't expect it to come back. That's D-rated. But he says a AAA minus rated bond is like money lent to a younger brother by the Gambino family. Now, what is the Gambino family? Gambino family, please Google. It's one of the big 5 mafia families. And this one is of New York. So the countries with ruined balance sheets who are still borrowing money off balance sheets from the Chinese are like these younger brothers borrowing from the Gambino family. I'm not even saying the Chinese are a mafia. All I'm saying is this is not like borrowing from your older brother. This is like borrowing from the big brother, and put both those B's in capital letters.